Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Susan Gibbons. I'm Vice Provost and the Andrew H. and Janet Dayton Neely Dean of the River Campus Libraries, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. This is our third lecture in our series, the Neely Series. This is our 10th year of the Neely Series, and each year we bring different speakers to campus. Sometimes they are alums or have some relationship with the university. Other times these are just fantastic individuals that we've been able to bring to campus in order to create a community, an intellectual community, one not just of the students and faculty on the campus, but a way to bring the greater Rochester community onto campus and to join us in these intellectual activities. So I welcome you all here tonight. The reason why we have this series is through the generosity of Andrew and Janet Dayton Neely through creating an endowment. And that endowment now in its 10th year has done a lot to bring some great speakers to campus, so we really are indebted to them for this opportunity. On your seat, hopefully you found the program for the rest of the Neely Series for the year. We have let's see, three more speakers to come this year. The next one will be on November 11th, Curtis White here in this room at 7:30, so I hope we'll see you again there. Tonight's speaker will be introduced by one of our colleagues from across the street, Dr. Clayton Baker. And Dr. Clayton Baker is a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of Rochester Medical Center, as well as being in the Department of Medical Humanities. And it's his role in the Department of Medical Humanities that we thought would best sort of tie together what we'd like to hear tonight from our main speaker, bringing together the science of medicine with humanity and with the study of people and understanding of people. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Baker to make introductions.
Thanks. When I was asked to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Danielle Ofri, I was eager to jump at the opportunity because I read quite a lot of her byline, which she has in many of the medical journals. She also in some online sources as well, and she's written a number of very well regarded books as well. But you know, all that aside, why is it so interesting to me to hear her speak? I just sort of offer an aphorism that came to mind, and that is that the most interesting traffic is usually seen at the intersections. And to give you sort of an image to support that, I'll go back to when I was traveling many years ago. After I got out of college over 20 years ago, I saved up a little money and went backpacking. And I found myself in India at one point, and I was riding in one of those motorized rickshaws. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Those little three-wheel things. They're sort of like the equivalent of a New York City taxi cab in certain parts of India, at least back then. And I was riding from one tourist attraction to the other and kind of not paying attention to things until we hit this roundabout. It was this incredibly huge roundabout, not like the little ones that we have here, but 4 or 5 lanes across. And it had this huge infield with a platform, and there was this guy dressed in this Victorian-looking uniform with a big whistle and white gloves, and he was directing all the traffic, and we just ground to a stop. And we've been buzzing along at 30 miles an hour. All of a sudden, we're just absolutely at a dead stop. And suddenly, I'm looking around, and I'm noticing the other traffic. And there were hundreds of bikes. There were dozens of other of these motorized rickshaws. There were these little Vespa scooters that have one person on them in Italy, but they have a family on them at least at this time in India. It was like the family minivan. You know, it had a kid sitting between the father's legs who was driving, the mother holding someone in the sitting side saddle in the back, and so on. And then there were the animals. You know, there's the trucks, the buses, and then there were the animals. There was even an elephant just sort of going, this is true, just sort of meandering through, and everyone's going around him. And it was a really striking image for me at the time for 2 reasons. Number one, because I just hadn't noticed anything that was going on up until I came to a dead stop at this intersection, if you will. And I think that this is really true in medicine, too, because we go 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we don't see things. And at least I don't sometimes. And someone who is at these intersections, like Dr. Ofri, helps us to step back and see things. And part of, give an example of one of the intersections that I think she works at is her hospital, Bellevue, which of course is one of the most famous hospitals in the United States, I think the oldest public hospital in the United States, and just covers the whole gamut in terms of any type of patient. And I think she's going to speak a little bit about that tonight. And also, she works between the intersection between medicine and other disciplines. Writing, obviously, the sort of modern media in terms of some of the work that she does online, and editing and publishing, being one of the founding editors, and I think still the chief editor for the Bellevue Literary Review, which is very successful and very, I highly recommend, excellent literary magazine with, or periodical, we should say, with a medical bent, I guess you could say. So she works at all of these intersections, and she allows us to step back and see this big picture that sometimes we kind of race past, or at least I do. And so I really think it's a pleasure to have her here, and I'm very excited to hear her speak and to share from her book. And so without any further ado, Dr. Danielle Ofri, she'll be talking about Medicine in Translation, Journeys with My Patients. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be part of this university for the last 36 hours, it feels as though, in many different departments. I do want to put in a plug for our literary magazine, the Bellevue Literary Review. It's the first literary magazine from a hospital, and we're approaching our 10th year next year. So I put out some buy one, get one free subscription forms in the back. The holidays are coming. Most gifts either raise your LDL or increase your waistline. This one doesn't. All the covers are archival photos from Bellevue. This particular one is from the Bellevue Chest Service. It's in one of the outdoor terraces where people got fresh air before we had INH, and they were being triaged by this young doctor in the back to either go to Saranac in upstate New York, Sanatoria, or to the Bellevue Chest Ward, and they got a ½ gram of morphine, a shot of whiskey for their trip. So today, these last 2 days, I've given a series of lectures that draw a little bit from the books, but I want to talk a bit about how this particular book came to be and a little bit about how writing plays a role in my life. I didn't at all plan to be a writer. I was a straight science major all the way. I never took any time off. But after residency, so I did high school, I did college, I did an MD PhD program, and then an internal medicine residency. So I was in school for a very, very long time. All my friends were taking years off in Europe, and they were traveling and going to kibbutz and backpacking in India. I was, taking my boards. But when I was an intern, a close childhood friend of mine died of a cardiac arrest at age 27, and he had a congenital heart condition called IHSS, idiopathic hypertrophic subaortic stenosis, that I had known about. He told me about that when I was a medical student, and his father had it, and they were being studied at NIH, but he was not ever symptomatic. And then he simply dropped dead, and this was the fall of my internship year. And I would say that's the first time I ever stopped for a moment to look at the traffic around me. I think having gone 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I'd never really stood still. And I think that was the first time I began to veer off the path. And I realized that, well, I wondered, what was I rushing toward? I'd been going for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And Josh's death really made me step back and think about where the rush was to. And starting with that, I began to think about taking some time off. And by the time I finished my 10th year at Bellevue, I'd had about as much of death and illness as I could handle for the moment. I needed to be away geographically, temporally, stylistically. And so of course, I had student loans to pay off and lots of them. So I signed up with a locum tenens agency, which is temp work for doctors. And so I worked in small towns in America for about 4 to 6 or 8 weeks, usually filling in for a short staff practice. And then when I finished that stint, I would travel for as long as the money would last. And then I would call my agent, collect from Oaxaca or wherever I was, and say, what do you got for next week? And then I'd end up in New Hampshire, and did this over the course of about 18 to 20 months. And it was the first time I'd been away from academia, away from medicine. And I remember that I canceled my medical journals, and I got all these novels, and I got my first laptop. And I remember the feeling of just wanting to write down some of these stories.